Political language is designed to make lies sound truthful and murder respectable, and to give an appearance of solidity to pure wind. From a very early age, perhaps the age of 5 or 6, I knew that when I grew up I should be a writer. Between the ages of about 17 and 24, I tried to abandon this idea, but I did so with the consciousness that I was outraging my true nature, and that sooner or later I should have to settle down and write books. I was the middle child of 3, but there was a gap of 5 years on either side, and I barely saw my father before I was 8. For this and other reasons, I was somewhat lonely, and I soon developed disagreeable mannerisms which made me unpopular throughout my school days. I had the lonely child's habit of making up stories and holding conversations with imaginary persons, and I think from the very start my literary ambitions were mixed up with feeling of being isolated and undervalued. I knew that I had the facility with words, and a power of facing unpleasant facts. And I felt this created a sort of private world in which I could get my own back for my failure in everyday life. Nevertheless, the volume of serious, i.e. seriously intended, writing which I produced all throughout my childhood and boyhood would not amount to half a dozen pages. I wrote my first poem at the age of 4, my mother taking it down to dictation. I cannot remember anything about it except that it was about a tiger, and the tiger had chair-like teeth. A good enough phrase. But I fancy the poem was a plagiarism of Blake's Tiger Tiger. At 11, when the War of 1914-18 broke out, I wrote a patriotic poem which was printed in the local newspaper. From time to time, when I was a bit older, I wrote bad and usually unfinished nature poems. I give all this background information because I do not think that one can assess a writer's motives without knowing something of his early development. His subject matter will be determined by the age in which he lives. At least, this is true in tumultuous revolutionary ages like our own. But before he ever begins to write, he will have acquired an emotional attitude from which he will never completely escape. It is his job, no doubt, to discipline his temperament and avoid getting stuck at some immature stage or in some perverse mood. But if he escapes from his early influences altogether, he will have killed his impulse to write. Putting aside the need to earn a living, I think there are 4 great motives for writing, at any rate for writing prose. They exist in different degrees in every writer, and in any one writer the proportions will vary from time to time, according to the atmosphere in which he is living. They are sheer egoism, desire to seem clever, to be talked about, to be remembered after death, to get your own back on the grown-ups who snubbed you in childhood. It is humbug to pretend that this is not a motive, and a strong one. Writers share this characteristic with scientists, artists, politicians, lawyers, soldiers, successful businessmen, in short, with the whole top crust of humanity. The great mass of human beings are not acutely selfish. After the age of about 30, they abandon individual ambition. In many cases, indeed, they almost abandon the sense of being individuals at all, and live chiefly for others, or are simply smothered under drudgery. But there is also the minority of gifted, willful people who are determined to live their own lives to the end, and writers belong in this class. Serious writers, I should say, are on the whole more vain and self-centered than journalists, though less interested in money. Aesthetic enthusiasm, perception of beauty in the external world, or on the other hand, in words and their right arrangement. Pleasure in the impact of one sound or another, in the firmness of good prose or the rhythm of a good story. Desire to share an experience which one feels is valuable and ought not to be missed. The aesthetic motive is very feeble in a lot of writers, but even a pamphleteer or a writer of textbooks will have pet words and phrases which appeal for him for non-utilitarian reasons. Historical impulse, desire to see things how they are, to find out true facts and store them up for the use of posterity. And for political purpose, using the word political in the widest possible sense, desire to push the world into a certain direction or to alter other people's idea of the kinds of society that they should strive after. Once again, no book is generally free from political bias. The opinion that art should have nothing to do with politics is itself a political attitude. I have not written a novel for 7 years, but I hope to write one fairly soon. It is bound to be a failure. Every book is a failure. But I know with some clarity what kind of book I want to write. All writers are vain, selfish and lazy, and at the very bottom of their motives there lies a mystery. Writing a book is a horrible, exhausting struggle, like a long bout of some painful illness. One would never undertake such a thing if one were not driven on by some demon whom one can neither resist nor understand. For all one knows, that demon is simply the same instinct that makes a baby squall for attention. And yet it is also true that one can write nothing readable unless one constantly struggles to efface one's own personality. Good prose is like a window pane. I cannot say with certainty which of my motives are the strongest, but I know which of them deserve to be followed. And looking back through my work, I see that it is invariably where I lacked a political purpose that I wrote lifeless books and was betrayed into purple passages, sentences without meaning, decorative adjectives, and humbug generally.